New videos every day.
If you are familiar with the USDA Food Guide Pyramid, you know that at the bottom of the Food Guide Pyramid, the servings that you're supposed to eat the most of are the breads, grains, and cereals, which is 6 to 11 servings a day. However, in other countries and other parts of the world, not everybody has that same opinion. So what we are going to talk about today are the different food guidelines and food pyramids and the different things that countries have come up with, that they have set guidelines for their own countries. And I think you're going to find this very interesting because not everybody has the theory of America that we're supposed to eat 6 to 11 servings of grains every day. Now, the pictures we used weren't very large for the guidelines. We actually got them out of a report, so I'm going to put a link to that actual report that we got the information from in the video description so that you can access that article and look at the pictures for yourself in more detail. Portugal. Okay, so the first set of guidelines that we're going to look at are from Portugal. Now, if you look at this picture of the guidelines, you'll notice that the fruits and vegetables category, the fruits and vegetables section, is about 40% of the entire circle, and it's a lot bigger than the category given to the grains and the cereals and things like that. So even in Portugal, they believe that fruits and vegetables should be eaten in larger majorities, larger portions than the bread, cereals, and grains. Sweden. Okay, so if you look at the Sweden guidelines, notice that there are 3 categories to the right top corner of the circle, and it's fruits, and then it looks like leafy greens, and then root vegetables. So you have 3 categories that have fruits and vegetables in them, which is about 50% of their diet they're recommending should come from fruits and vegetables. Now look at the grains section. That accounts for about only 15% of their diet. So really think about that in comparison to our own food guide pyramid. Sweden is recommending only about 15% grains and about 50% fruits and vegetables. Australia. Now, if you look at the Australia guidelines, it's also in a circular shape, and the grain category and the fruits and vegetables category are almost exactly the same size, so they're recommending equal portions of grains and fruits and vegetables. Now, if you look at the bottom right corner of the chart there, it's kind of hard to see, but it says, or it's showing sweets, ice cream, fats, and oils, and things like that. So they're basically saying that it doesn't even belong in the diet. Those are just, extras that don't belong in the recommendations. So that's why they put it at the bottom of the chart. And that, in comparison to the American food guidelines, our oils and fats are on the top of the food guide pyramid. And even though they say use sparingly, they are included. And then also on the Australian guidelines, they have water, and so they're obviously recommending that you drink water. Great Britain. Now with Great Britain, it's similar to the Australian guidelines in that the grain category is about the same amount of servings of the fruits and vegetables category. And then they're also recommending the dairy, protein, all those things are similar to Australia and America. But I wanted to point out that they also are saying equivalent grains and equivalent fruits and vegetables. China. If you're looking at the Chinese guidelines for food intake, the bottom of their, pyramid guidelines here, they're emphasizing, the intake of carbohydrates. But I want you to look at something that's different than other guidelines because they are actually putting starchy vegetables in the bottom here. So it's not just grains, breads. They're including starchy vegetables in this category right here. Whereas with America, we consider a vegetable in our guidelines, corn and potatoes as the vegetable category. It actually, in the Chinese guidelines, is considered a starch and in the bread category. Canada. Okay, looking at Canada's guidelines, this is probably the most similar to the US as far as recommending the carbohydrates in higher amounts than the fruits and vegetables. Look at how large the serving sizes look for the carbohydrates. I mean, they have a ton of carbs on there. And so that's just the one that I found that looks the most similar to the USDA food guide pyramid. Korea. Now, the Korean guidelines are similar to the Chinese guidelines in that in the bottom category, they include starchy vegetables, the potatoes, the corn, those types of vegetables. Now, in the American guidelines, those vegetables are included in the vegetable category rather than the starch category. So even in Korea, they are emphasizing fruits and vegetables over the carbohydrate intake. Germany. Now, Germany is emphasizing about 25% of carbohydrate intake, 25% vegetable intake, and also an additional about 15 to 20% of fruit intake. So if you're combining the vegetable and fruit intake, it is in higher quantities than the carbohydrate intake. So even Germany is, not agreeing with the American guidelines for food intake. Mexico. When you're looking at the Mexico guidelines, the fruit and vegetable intake is really large, but then look at the category. It's basically its own category for all the different beans, and it's real close to the meat category, so they're counting it as a protein. But I like that they're emphasizing all the different types of beans as a protein, but then also beans count as a vegetable. So when you take into account the beans and then all the fruits and vegetables that they're recommending, they're also emphasizing fruits and vegetables over grains. So maybe you're wondering who's right. Everybody was recommending different things. They had different guidelines. So who's right? Is Canada right? Is Germany right? Is Korea right? Is the US right? Well, guess what? I don't think any of them are right. In our next video, I am going to talk to you about the food guide pyramid or the food guidelines that I believe is the best. So in the midst of all those guidelines, I know that you want to know what you should be eating. And so that's what we are going to talk about in our next video. I don't want you to think that there's no solution out there. So subscribe, rate the video, leave your comments, and make sure you subscribe because that'll let you know when I do the next video, which you really should watch. See you next time. Bye.